So now we start again our session. We have now Raphael Eser from Berlin, Humboldt University in Berlin. I heard him already and his team about Elba smelting sites some years ago, and they got a very interesting evidence and interesting results, and we will hear today a report on the different aspects of the, let's say, more or less late Iron Age sites. He found Hellenistic sites in the Elba smelting landscape, life and work, and I'm very curious to hear what is now your embedding to the wider discussion. And yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, I have to compart.
So we do see your screen, so you just to start your presentation.
There is everything. Yes. Yeah. So, well, okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I'm talking here from Berlin today. As we have already been in Italy, we'll go a little bit farther south in modern-day Tuscany to the island of Elba, famous for being the place of exile for Napoleon, for which the island is still gaining its profit from the tourism of Napoleon, or looking for Napoleon sites on that side. I'm more interested in the ancient time, in the Antiquity, and particularly in the iron smelting that was conducting on the island itself. So that's the structure for the next 15 minutes, a more or less bigger introduction. Then we will came to some, I would say, aspects of lives that I will deduct from the thin material basis we have, and we will finish with the conclusions. So Elba, as you see, is lying in front of the Tuscan coast. It's one of the middle-sized islands of Italy, between Corsica and Tuscany. Also to Sardinia, it's not very far. And you have a geomorphological tripartition, having a big granite plateau in the west, then a rather hilly landside, Flysch hillside in the central Elba, and the north-south stretching ridge with a lot of geological formations, so that one can talk about Elba from geological point of view as a geological puzzle. We see there are several deep valleys, and you've got a very, very articulated coastline with a lot of bays. So today's landscape of the island is more or less, it's a green island. It's very fertile. As you see there, the people are living in the Great Plains, or in the few Great Plains that there are in the islands, and also these Great Plains at these suitable beaches at the landing sites, where the places for the ancient iron smelting sites. And that's another remarkable feature of Elba, that are these old iron open cast mines for iron. They're accessible at the sea, and they're close to the sea, accessible by open day diggings, and they're nowadays overprinted by modern iron industry or iron mining facilities. Yeah, after 4 years of research, I've collected all the information that there is Concerning the smelting sites on Elba Island, I've been collecting about 252 smelting sites, but there's one big problem. We get only less material for the dating. In the end, someone can divide 27 surely ancient smelting sites, mostly dating between the mid-4th century BC and the 1st century AD. That depends on the coins and ceramics and radiocarbon dates that are published or have been conducted in the last years. And one can adjust 8 potential ancient smelting sites, because I've studied some archive material from a Swedish researcher who has done research in the 50s, but I have only the archive material, but not always the real archaeological remains. So as one can see, we nearly get a pattern that all these Hellenistic, Roman smelting sites are placed nearly all at the coast, at wider bays, near historical anchorages, also some anchorages that one can find on maps, for example, from the 14th century BC, 14th century AD also, and they're lying at the mouth of creeks, so there's access to water, and they're having a bigger, wider valley, mostly in the hinterland. That's what I will connect to the resources that is that's necessary for iron smelting. There's in particular the 2 main resources for iron smelting: iron ore and the charcoal. But there are also the other resources that will give you a better result when iron smelting, for example, by building a furnace with clay, refractory stones, straw, and sand, and water. You will have the furnace building, and for sure with the air inside you will get also better smelting and so on. At least I put also here 2 other resources. I don't know if I would say that again after yesterday's lectures, the food stuff and the knowledge. The iron ore in Elba, as I already said, get some preconditions. One, we get a good high iron ore content, in the hematite, mostly in northern deposits of the east. For example, here at Rio Albuno, Rio, and Terranera. In Calamita, we have mostly magnetite that's also in high iron content. As I already said, they're all accessible by sea or located at sea, and they're all near surface ore bodies. And what's concerning about the fact that maybe in the ancient people have recognized the iron resources as a real ore, as suitable for digging, it's the fact that we have in the literary resources the topos of inaccessible of the mines in antiquity for Elba, as for example Servius in the Aeneid, or Virgil in the Aeneid, or the Pliny he was talking about Ilvam Feriferate. So that's Elba, what I will call a research landscape. We have, that's nowadays vegetation, but their potential vegetation would be maybe for antiquity the same. We're presuming that, at least. As we get wood, makey wood, that's also very suitable for doing charcoal, for having charcoal burning. We get the iron resources on the island. We can have clay. You can find clay also, for example, here in the Barbatoyer Valley on the island itself. There are the beaches suitable for landing. So so other food stuff, for example, could transport it to the island. If not, it were produced in the plains itself. So Elba has a lot of resources that are provided for the iron smelting on the island itself. Yeah, after the last four years of research, came also to the conclusions that there are some imprinting phases of the iron smelting in Elba. It begins in a copper smelting phase, where we have the introduction of the coming of iron. Then we have a strange situation in the initial phase that we only have the digging of iron or the mining of iron, meanwhile the iron ore is smelted far away on the mainland in Populonia. Coming to what I will interpose in phase of increase, due to the fact that now the spreading of iron smelting technology comes to the island from the mainland and is spreading along the western coast. Maybe that's triggered because the Etruscan and Romans in the 4th and 3rd century are under big military pressure, to a real climax in the 2nd and 1st century BC, where we have this pattern where the island's resources is managed fully, completely around the whole island. At least we see in the material basis and in the material remains that are also getting fewer for the 1st and 2nd century AD, maybe a phase of collapse where we did get different systems of the economical integration of this island. It would maybe now at this time more based on agriculture than on mining, so a phase of collapse. That's the history of research that's going now until 200 years ago, more or less. It's corresponding more or less with the modern phase of iron steel production on Elba. And that's what we are dealing here with when working with archaeometallurgical in ancient Elba. This has several problems. First, most of the ancient slag heaps are nowadays lost due to the excavation between the First and Second World War for resmelting of the ancient iron slag, because they contained also still a lot of iron. And second, the archaeological traces found during these industrial excavations, such as ceramics, coins, metal finds, and so on, gained an opposite to Populonia slags that was literally archaeological interest. And that's what I would now point a little bit more out. That's first, that are the sites, the smelting sites where we have found wine amphora and Campanian black glazeware. So you can see that's nearly for all, or for most of the smelting sites in Elba that we can assume. For example, at the site of San Andrea, you have digging up also in the archive of John Nillen, the Swedish researcher from the 1950s. He has found, for example, these fragmented Dressel 1A amphora, this wine amphora, coming from a slag accumulation. And at the same site, you have only about 200 meters far away, dating to the same time, frag, also with wine amphoras. And in this wine amphora, for example, after opening it, there was still the tap to close the amphora. They found also wine. So when we get here the transport of wine for the iron smelters at the smelting sites, and when you see this in connection with the Campanian black glazeware, that's a fine ware mostly used for drinking. For example, at other side, at Lispazzi, where you get these sketch of Vincenzo Mellini, who worked about 1870, and which his sketches were published 70 years later. You get, for example, some forms that you can conduct to one handle, a two-handle beaker. So from the combination of the Campanian black glazeware and the wine amphora, maybe one can think when working at a real hot furnace, one get thirsty, and so he has maybe drunken alcohol, especially also this, as alcohol is a high calorific drink in certain times. Another fact could be also the finds of patera, as these libation bowls, where you may have done pouring on your furnace or on some other kind of stuff on your ore for an offering. And there are nowadays ethnographical comparisons in Ethiopia where if you Yashua as the offering of food or drink or beer, for example, or coffee before drinking it, or also in Tanzania, where it's the, for example, drinking a little bit beer and spitting of beer on furnaces, so that one can think at the offering of wine and alcohol at the smelting site. Another fact could be that the wine was transported there for collective work feast. So one will have a smelting campaign, for example, let's say it's about 100 tons of iron ore to smelt. This will take some time and will involve more people from the site, so that we will have, like, maybe in the end as recompensation and collective work feast. Another fact are the often neglected are the lamps, the oil lamps. There are some oil lamps that did appear in the strata of different smelting sites. As I've said, all lamps someone would connect normally for underground diggings, but at Elba we don't have really, as there's nearly no evidence that there have been underground diggings in ancient times. There's only one reported gallery from the 7th century AD that should have been an underground digging of Roman time. Otherwise, you never find any indications for underground diggings. So that's why I would connect the oil lamps with the sites, with the smelting site itself. So if we see what's the average hours of daylight, for example, at Lispazzi, from which are these Warzenlampes originating, and you don't have always the same time span for a smelting result. Also, when you get more experience, maybe it's getting more and more. At the same time, you can see that's possible when beginning after the preparing courses, for example, like crushing the ore, building the furnace, it's getting late, and you will have to search for your thongs or for a hammer or for a poke or something, and you're preoccupied in dealing with your furnace. You may have used maybe these oil lamps for night work to finish the furnace batch and to get your iron smelting result. Especially another activity that's connected with iron smelting is depending on night work, that's the charcoal burning. So I would connect the oil lamps found at the iron smelting sites with night work. And there's also the fact that Julius Paulus, legal advocate who's doing his sentencia, so legal sentences in the 2nd, 3rd century, he's telling us that especially a free man in control of his own status can do better or worse, and therefore he leases his services for day and night work, and this leasing of his service for day and night work could maybe point also on wage labor at these smelting sites, iron smelting sites. Coming back to wage labor, there are also some coins that were found in the heaps on the islands, nearly all of them lost. There are also no images left, but especially the one researcher, Vincenzo Mellini, from 1870, he has built, he was the mining engineer in Lispazzi. He has built a little museum in his own house that he then gave to the Museum of Porto Ferraio, and where you can see nowadays some Roman bronze coins without fine indication Museum of Porto Raphael that could be originating from these slag heaps at Lispazzi, as he's doing some good descriptions that are fitting very well to these coins that are now in the museum at Porto Ferraio, originating from the Museum Mellini, from the sites who he has excavated. So, and when we're there looking up, for example, for the written sources of the time, one will came back to Diodor. He's talking about the Elban Shen Appuratoire, and then he's coming to the iron blooms that are purchased by merchants in exchange either for the money or for the goods. So I will connect these coins that were found at the smelting sites with possible wage labor for these iron smelting persons, or even that's money for the trade with the traders that are coming to the landing sites at the single ironworking sites, and where they get also goods and money, for example, also wine in the payment and kind loan, that we have also seen some today, when some mining workers get brandwine, schnapps, for example, for working in the mine. So to come to a conclusion, or maybe a picture of how work was at an iron smelting site, the mainland at Veronica, looking on Elba. So I would adjust, for example, for Elba, the ceramic assembles and the wine amphora that could point at the consumption of alcohol. It could be nutritional, social, or religious reason. I would also adjust some oil lamps for application of night work when it's getting dark and you haven't finished to conduct your iron smelting, and some bronze coins that are merely connected with wage labor or with trade at these sites. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, talk too much.
Thank you, Dr. Eser, for this interesting talk about resource landscape or resource scape. That shows us that also the nights are of importance for resource scapes, especially using them for smelting, waiting on the bloom, drinking alcohol when waiting, and whatever. So it has a very interesting impact in different aspects. If there is now the one or other question, please raise it now. Otherwise, we would continue. But I have to see if there is a question from someone of the audience. Peter and Gary, do look around if there is a raising or waving hand as well. So then we keep these questions in mind, Dr. Eser, and we will have it renewed again during our final roundtable.